Good evening. Well, it was the Scottish Minister, Humza Yousaf, who kicked the debate off yesterday. I mentioned it briefly at the end of the show last night. He is arguing that we should take people, maybe a lot of people, from Gaza. This is what the Scottish First Minister had to say.
There are currently 1 million people displaced within Gaza. So therefore, I'm calling today on the international community to commit to a worldwide refugee programme for the people of Gaza. I'm calling on the UK government to take two urgent steps. Firstly, they should immediately begin work on the creation of a refugee resettlement scheme for those in Gaza who want to and, of course, are able to leave. And when they do so, Scotland is willing to be the first country in the UK to offer safety and sanctuary to those who are caught up in these terrible attacks.
Well, there we are. Scotland is ready, but he's really saying the whole of the UK should be ready. Now, let's be clear about one thing. Since 2016, we have taken in over 500,000 people, 500,000 people as refugees. We've been told it's all because of exceptional circumstances in Hong Kong, in Syria, in Afghanistan, and of course, more recently, in Ukraine. The numbers are so high because they're exceptional. But hey, here comes yet another exception. And you know something? The UNHCR say there are 80 million people around the world who are living in war zones who potentially could qualify as refugees. I would make the argument that if you add to that the hordes of young men crossing the English Channel, who we have to put up in 400 hotels, in private residences, and now, of course, back on barges in Dorset, that we simply can't cope. And in terms of numbers, we should say enough. What I find even more interesting is the reaction of people who are neighbours to Gaza. For example, take what the Egyptian president said yesterday. He said what is happening now in Gaza is an attempt to force civilian residents to take refuge and migrate to Egypt, which should not be accepted. Egypt rejects any attempt to resolve the Palestinian issue by military means or through the forced displacement of Palestinians from their land, which would come at the expense of other countries of the region. He went on to say that the Egyptian people would go out and protest in their millions if called upon to do so. So Egypt will not be taking any refugees from Gaza. King Abdullah II of Jordan said, no refugees in Jordan, no refugees in Egypt. And let's remind ourselves, shall we? Let's remind ourselves that Saudi Arabia did not take a single refugee from Syria because they were worried it would affect their culture and their safety in Saudi Arabia. These are words that maybe we ought to listen to. And of course, we've had over the course of the last week these marches that have taken place in London, in Belfast, in Birmingham, in Edinburgh, in Manchester, marches at which people who live within our communities but have a different set of values to those of the more settled population have been out, in some cases, openly celebrating terrorist atrocities. Now, I'm going to give you some stats from Denmark that are very shocking. In 1992, Denmark gave refuge to 321 Palestinians. By 2019, the government produced results for what had happened to them. 64% of those that had been given refuge had obtained criminal records. 34% of their children had obtained criminal records. And bear in mind, many of the children hadn't yet grown up. And the vast majority were living on welfare. That particular influx of refugees that went in to Denmark proved to be a mistake and a complete disaster. And that's before Hamas really got into gear. I'd ask Humza Yousaf and anyone that thinks we should take large numbers of people from Gaza, why on earth should we risk our national security? Frankly, it doesn't make sense. We've had a record over centuries of helping people in trouble. But I say for now, enough's enough. And I say that on the very day that the integration czar for the government, who is independent of the Home Office, has said that because of mass integration, we have serious problems with integration in our country. So should we take people from Gaza? My answer is no. Love to know what you think. Please, Farage@gbnews.com.